Good evening to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Tom, let me just start with you, because there are a few buckets of concerns about Pete Hegseth. One is his views and his behavior, which you almost think is sort of tertiary to the fact that he also has not run a large organization. He's run a couple of small organizations, and he has apparently done that very badly. And three is we are a world in danger at levels that have not seen until since pre-World War I and pre-World War II. We're really a tinderbox right now, and we need all the care that we can give this world. I sense your biggest concern lies in bucket three.
Well, you know, it's the game of horrible alternatives to have to choose which thing you're worried about most, that he lacks the character to lead the U.S. Armed Forces, that he has no experience and will be almost, certainly be in over his head during a crisis, trying to advise the president. But yeah, I mean, the first thing I thought when Vance broke the tie was that I could just, having been to Moscow many times and walked past their defense ministry, I could just see them sitting inside the Ministry of Defense and looking at each other and saying, this can't be real. We couldn't have lucked out this way, to have someone this inexperienced and flawed. And also someone who, the Senate sent a message, someone who doesn't really have the overwhelming confidence of the American people's elected representatives. If you have to become Secretary of Defense by one tie-breaking vote, that's a nomination that should have been pulled, because you can do that with, if you want to, with the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, a lot of other things. You can't do that with the Secretary of Defense, and yet here we are.
Yeah, it's an intriguing point, Jennifer, because the vice president in a close Senate, including Vice President Kamala Harris, broke ties all the time. Not ties like this. Not on things that are this important. And as I listed in the intro, there were lots of Republicans who would have gotten overwhelming support, even from Democrats, because people do accept what Susan Collins says. Generally speaking, the president gets their nominee unless there's a problem. There's a problem here.
Yeah, there sure is. And you asked why Trump would do it. It's several reasons. First of all, he does want to embarrass the Senate and bend them to his will. Secondly, his entire mission is to decapitate and disable functional government. So by putting in entirely incompetent toadies, he goes a long way towards doing that. Once the government is rid of professionals, of skilled expertise, then Donald Trump can careen from one side of the street to the other, taking the American people and our national security with us. And I must say, it is remarkable during a week in which these people made such an issue of DEI, meaning in their aim, hiring people who are not qualified, that they would have had this pathetic specimen as Secretary of Defense. This is the worst kind of DEI for white incompetent drunks. And this should not be tolerated. It shouldn't be tolerated for someone who is, as you point out, the Secretary of Agriculture. And it shouldn't be tolerated for someone who is going to run an organization in which any of this behavior would have been disqualifying. You cannot be in the military and be a drunk. You cannot be in the military, be an officer, and be guilty of, for example, disloyalty to one's spouse. You cannot be in the military and miscarry and misappropriate funds. All of this is disqualifying. So what does this send as a message down the troops? It's anything goes, so long as you're a loyalist to Trump will accept any kind of behavior. And so what will happen is the good people will leave at the end of their service. The bad people will rise up. And you know what happened in Russia when they operated on a patronage system, a cronyism system, a corruption system? They got a military that is getting their ass kicked in Ukraine. And that's what happens when a military becomes corrupted. They become weak, they become ineffective, and the national security of their country suffers.
So just for the record, Pete Hegseth himself has denied drunkenness and misappropriation of funds. He has said, however, if he is made defense secretary, he's going to give up drinking. Worth keeping an eye on that space. Tom Nichols, Jen Rubin talks about the good people leaving and the bad people staying. The good news, or maybe the hope, and I think I tried this with you a week ago, and you didn't bite, is that there are a lot of good senior people in the military who 20, 25, 30, 35 years ago made a commitment to risk their lives for the safety of this country who might not roll over for a Pete Hegseth or a Donald Trump. What's your sense of that?
Yeah, look, I think you're going to have two things happening. I've said for years that Donald Trump is the patron saint of the third string. He is the person who takes people who normally wouldn't be qualified for anything. He elevates them to remarkable heights. That's going to happen it's happened at the very top of the DOD, and it's going to happen in DOD staffing. And sure, I'm going to guess that there will be people in the DOD who are going to decide that, this is a good time to leave federal service. I still believe, and again, from years of teaching officers, in the really magnificent professionalism of the U.S. Officer Corps, that I think is going to keep a lot of people doing the best job they can do, regardless of who's at the top, either of the Pentagon or in the White House. That is their apolitical code of service, and thank God for it. But there are going to be people that in the Pentagon, I'm sure, who are going to have heartburn with saying Secretary Hegseth. And I think the other thing that's going to happen, Ali, that will drive people out is that when you have a very weak Secretary of Defense like this who has no experience, he's not going to be running the place. I mean, I've brought this up before. There are going to be people that say, look, I don't really feel like taking orders from a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. I've just been here too long, and, this isn't, this is chaos. Now, let me just add one proviso. I really hope we're all wrong. I mean, for the good of the country, I hope all three of us are wrong. But as a man who recreationally gambles, I would tell you that's not the bet I would make.
Jennifer Rubin, it's a bit of a day late, dollar short situation, but McConnell had some strong words. I also remembered McConnell having some strong words after January 6th. Didn't amount to much. But he's got some strong words about the fact that the defense secretary is usually somebody who has the support of the American people, or at least the elected officials, as Tom said. Pete Hegseth doesn't rise above any bar here, and he's not setting himself up for success. McConnell saying it, relevant, not relevant?
Maybe he should have thought about this before he endorsed Donald Trump. He knew very well these were the kind of people that Donald Trump would have chosen. So maybe he should have thought back to that impeachment trial. Maybe he should have thought back to the election. Maybe he should have spoken up once in his career for the good of the country. It is too late now. And you'll notice that he is completely without influence with his colleagues. Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins will occasionally, perhaps more occasionally than we otherwise have seen, do the right thing because they have some sense of responsibility. The rest of them are lost, and McConnell no longer has any sway. He has lost his perch, and now he is crying in the wilderness, just like those Democrats used to do, who he used to mock, who he used to steamroll over. So frankly, I'm not all that impressed with what he's doing. It's sort of nice that he's come along. Welcome to the resistance, but it doesn't make a dime's worth of difference. And it would be very nice if he would go back and do some mea culpas and talk to some of his colleagues about the danger they have now taken on themselves. Every screw up, every scandal, every casualty, every mismanagement in the Pentagon, they own because they voted for this guy, knowing he was an incompetent fool. And McConnell might want to put them, up to that, might remind them of this. What I would say is this: the only good thing about this is maybe some of them will think twice and three times about confirming even more ridiculous nominees like Tulsi Gabbard or Kash Patel. Guys, you don't want to vote against all of them. Just pick one of them to knock out. Pick just one. Maybe Tulsi Gabbard, who's the Assad stooge.
I haven't had a whole lot of surprises to the upside this week, Jennifer. But hey, you know what? I'll take them. Next week's a new week. We'll see what happens. Thanks to both of you. Great to see you both, Jennifer Rubin and Tom Nichols. Thanks very much for being with us on this on an eventful